Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast, where we are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every week, we have the opportunity to bring on authors, speakers, coaches, CEOs, those who are also passionate about putting God back in business. It's no different this week. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited this week because our guest today, I'm a big fan of his books and his material, and he's blessed a ton of people. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, Steve Cuss. He's the author, speaker, coach, and a host of other things we'll get into. He's got such a unique background. But Steve, welcome to the Fortified Life podcast.
Jason, thanks so much. Yeah, it's a treat to be with you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Steve, as we know, and I love your bio because I have another friend of mine that not quite a similar trajectory, but he just has his combination of his experience. He's the only other person that I know of that has that sort of track record. And so, Steve, we know you didn't wake up in 2025 doing what you're doing. So, give us just an overview of how you got to doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah, so I grew up in Western Australia, moved to America for Bible college to become a pastor with every intention of moving back home to Australia. Ended up settling in America, but after Bible college, I thought my next step would be some kind of a church job. But kind of desperation, I was engaged to be married. I needed work for 1 year while my wife, at the time fiance, was finishing up college. And I ended up doing a 1 year chaplain residency. It's if you ever watch hospital dramas, you know that medical students do a medical residency. What they don't show on TV is ministry students can do a chaplain residency. And that's really the fastest link to what I do now because among a lot of other lessons I learned as a chaplain, I learned how to notice anxiety.
Mm.
I learned how to notice, and you might think that's a real obvious thing, like when you're a chaplain, people are dying and they're at the end of their rope. It's you're catching people in the worst moments of their life. So you might say, how hard can it be to notice anxiety in that situation? But what I was most surprised to discover was how much my anxiety was coming into the room with me. Things
Mm.
like my need to say the right thing, my need to make people feel better. So I would bring my anxiety in, not realizing I had any at all. So that was back in the 90s. And I've spent the rest of my life I'm primarily in the ministry field, teaching people how to notice and diffuse anxiety, reactivity in themselves and in their people. So I do a ton of organizational consulting because if you take the average workplace, most people don't leave their jobs, they leave their boss, they leave the culture. The values are written on the wall, but then the actual unspoken values will
Right.
actually behave. That's why people leave. So I'm often brought in to help people notice and lower reactivity in their work relationships. There's a lot more, but that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. Steve, that is powerful for multiple reasons. I'm sure the data, anxiety, depression, just mental health in general is being talked about more than ever
Yeah.
today. I'm curious, Steve, when you began to recognize anxiety, like what does it take? And we'll come back to your books here in a
Yeah.
little bit. But what was that process like? Like, how did you, oh man, you know what? When I worry a little bit too much about what I'm going to say, just take us through that personally, and then we'll get to the impact part with your materials in your book. But how does one even come to that conclusion on their own?
Right. I think I was given the gift of, I didn't come to the conclusion on my own. I was given the gift of some pretty aggressive chaplain supervisors that just showed it to me whether I wanted to see it or not. So I had a unique experience. I guess I'd say this, Jason. You can't be in the room with somebody who's dying without being
Mm.
affected by it. It's not possible. If you're not affected by it, you have no business being a chaplain. So the training, they intentionally plunge you into rooms of trauma and death, mostly so you can find what's going on under the surface in your own life.
Wow.
So that's how I did it. But most people, of course, they don't do it that way. Most people, they just keep running into themselves. They get tired of the way their coping mechanisms aren't working for them anymore. That's
Wow.
how most people find it. I, when I was a chaplain, I didn't know I was anxious at all. I thought I was a confident, well-adjusted person. So yeah, for me, it was the intensive care in the emergency room that introduced me to my fears, my coping mechanisms. And I think once you see them, you can't unsee them. So, for example, if somebody's a people pleaser, by the time you've gotten to a certain age, people pleasing has bitten you in the butt so much that
Mm.
just like enough. For others, they might be perfectionists, and that tortured goal of always getting it perfectly right is exhausting them. So, people usually call me when they've gotten to the end of their rope, that the thing that served them well for a while is now eating them alive. That's how I would say it.
Wow. That's very insightful there, Steve. And what I'm picking up from you is environment played a big part. Obviously, God in the background too, but just the environment you're in, the stimulus and the response. And you said something key, Steve. And I know you're talking about in the specific context of being a chaplain or in the hospital that, hey, you can't see death and pain and not respond accordingly.
Yeah.
I think there's a thread there, Steve, just when it comes to calling and purpose, or even if you're temporarily working a job or you're in a career. I think you left a little nugget for us. What's your why? Like, why do you do what you do, and why are you working
Yeah.
in this environment? I just wanted to point that out because I said, wow, I didn't want people to miss that. Hey, if you're not responding to death, I question the type of care that you would give. Just if you could touch on that for a second, Steve, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't take the time to really digest. Wait, why am I actually doing this? What do you think prevents us from maybe doing that level of introspection?
Oh, it's a I love that question. I think humans always. So, Jason, I'm a trout fisherman.
Mm.
I live in Colorado. I love fly fishing. I love getting in a stream and trying to catch trout. Trout are trying to eat the most food possible in the laziest way they can. That's how you catch trout, is you're trying to figure out where the food source is. And if the food source, like in most streams, the river is flowing, well, it's too hard for a trout to be in the flowing part of the river. So they're always going to be just in the quiet part, trying to get some of the food that's just washing down like a conveyor belt. Humans are like trout. We are trying to get through life with the least pain possible. And
Mm.
I think that's why some people don't ask why, because the answer can be terrifying. It can be scary to understand why you do what you do. And so I think most of us, and this was me, we don't really ask why until we have to, like we're
Mm.
cornered.
Wow.
I know for me, I was in a formal program where every day for 90 minutes, the chaplain residents and the supervisors would sit in a circle for an hour and a half. And one of us would end up being on the hot seat as the rest of them peppered us with questions about why did you do that the day before? We'd have to give a report for how we showed up the day before. And it was all about us getting to our why, getting to our core beliefs, getting to our coping mechanisms that aren't helpful. So I was given the gift at a young age of being shown my blind spots.
Mm.
And once you see your blind spots, you can't unsee them. So now the question is, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to pretend it's not there and cover it over? Or am I actually going to move toward the light and move toward truth and actually experience some freedom? I think the reason we do this work is for relief. I think relief is reason enough to do this deep digging. Is most people I work with, their body does not believe what their head believes about God. But their head believes in freedom and peace, but their body is not free or at peace. And I think that's a good enough reason to do this work.
Wow. Steve, I appreciate you doing that breakdown. It just, and you gave the nugget. So you're the man of wisdom. He said that. I said, man, Steve brings up a good point. And I won't forget, and folks, when you think of trout, think
Most food possible in the laziest way they can.
indeed. And I think that just, you talk about patterns in human behavior. So thanks for breaking that down. Oh, Steve, we've been teeing up here a lot of the resources that that you provide to organizations, and you do a lot of that advice and wisdom and coaching through being an author as
Yeah.
well. So we'll talk about your latest book, The Expectation Gap, but I wanted to take it back a little bit with anxiety. Your book, Managing Leadership Anxiety. What's the central point of that book, and why leadership anxiety in particular?
Good. Yeah, great. The central point of that book is that what the world needs most is a well leader, a leader that is working on themselves more than anything else. Every one of us have worked for an amazing boss, and most of us have worked for a terrible boss. Like most
Mm,
people, if I said to you, Jason, what's the best person you've ever worked for? You probably have someone in mind. You could probably tell me what it was about them. And then you probably work for someone and be like, I hope I never work for someone like that again. I
yeah.
would say the difference between those two people is one of them managed their anxiety, the other one didn't. Pretty simple.
Mm,
You're the best boss in the world. You can be exactly yourself around them. You can have a bad day and they can absorb it. You are safe to be you. And also, you want to be the best version of yourself around that person. The worst boss in the world, rules are for other people, not for them. They
mm,
wield their power against you rather than serving you with it. In short, they dump their anxiety on people. And so the tenet of the book is learn how to be well, because there's a certain kind of anxiety. I call it leadership anxiety. It's commonly known as reactivity.
mm,
It's the only anxiety that's contagious. And so we catch it and spread it to each other. And so for a leader to learn how to notice contagious anxiety and then be the one that diffuses it, that's the kind of person that everyone wants to work for. That allows your people to be well if you are well. So the two dynamics we study in that book is contagious anxiety and predictable patterns. So the two simple ideas are there's one kind of anxiety that's contagious, and that's reactivity. And then over time, contagious anxiety forms predictable patterns. So, for example, in a staff meeting, it's always the same person that uses the most words every meeting. It's always the same people that have their own secret meeting after the meeting. Those patterns are predictable and recurring. And if a leader can learn to notice contagious anxiety, notice when they're anxious, but also if a leader can notice the spread of it, like the pattern, the predictable pattern, they can be such a powerful agent of change and health in their organization.
mm. My goodness, Steve. That is, that folks, is why you need to go out and get the book for sure. Man, just the way you break that down, Steve, that's huge. One of what was really insightful, Steve, is the way you start the book
Yeah.
with the anxiety gap. I've heard this quote in many contexts, but the statement from, I believe, is Viktor Frankl, the
Yeah.
between stimulus and response, there is a space, and the space, there's the power to choose our response, and our response lies our growth and our freedom. So just talk about not just the quote, but even just that anxiety gap that exists.
Yeah. The simplest way to notice that gap is anytime you are responsible to do something and you don't know what to do. That's a pretty common experience for a leader. Most leaders, we have to grapple with the fact that we won't always know what to do. And yet,
Mm,
because we're the leader, we're responsible to make the call. COVID wasn't so far ago that we probably remember it. Most of us didn't know what to do when we were leading through COVID. That will make most leaders anxious.
mm,
Okay, what now? What are you going to do now? Are you going to put up a pretense and act like you know what to do when you really don't? And your people see through that? Are you going to shy away from leading because it's too difficult? Like it's vulnerable to make a mistake in public.
yeah.
Or are you going to do the deeper work and say, I'm a human being. God has called me to lead. I'm going to make the call, right or wrong, and I'm going to take responsibility for it. Anytime that would be one example so on my team, we would prescribe for my team, especially my newer team members. They would have to go out and we would put them in a situation where they didn't know what to do, but they were the one responsible, just to get them practicing that uncomfortable feeling of leading when you don't know what to do. But the second example would be like me when I was a chaplain and the other residents and my supervisors giving me the gift of blind spot knowledge.
Mm.
I think the most powerful question a leader can ask their team is, how do you experience me when I'm at my worst? And how do you experience me when I'm at my best? Now, that's a vulnerable question to ask your team. And if you're a domineering leader, they probably won't tell you the truth, honestly, by now. But if you're a safe leader, they may tell you there's a gap between you at your best and you at your worst. That's your goal this year, is how do I bridge that gap so that me at my worst isn't as canyon sized from me at my best, that is more integrated, that it's not about being perfect. It's not about always being well. It's about being aware of my impact on others and managing that. So that would be a couple of examples of the gap.
Steve, as you were saying that,
Mm.
I'm picking up, it's not, you don't have to be perfect. You just got to be present.
We
Yeah.
have to be a
Yeah.
human being. Yeah. So vulnerability is a huge asset in leadership. Yeah.
I love that. Folks, if you want to learn more about this, make sure you get your copy of Managing Leadership Anxiety. Steve, where can people go grab a copy of that resource?
Yeah, they can get it anywhere they buy books, Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble. They can go to my website, stevecusswords.com, and that has all my resources, my books, and I've got a podcast and other things that they can check out as well.
I love it. And folks, guess what? That was all the wisdom nuggets. That's just one item. That was the first book. Steve's got a more recent book called The Expectation Gap. Now, Steve, here's what, in my short time of knowing you, if you teed up that much breakthrough on a topic like anxiety and specifically leadership anxiety, I can only imagine where this is going with the topic of expectations. So, Steve, just like we did with managing leadership anxiety, what's the central theme of this book? And maybe building on the work that you've done, why attack something like expectations?
Yeah. Okay. So my specialty is the dynamics that infect our relationships. That's what I do in a nutshell. I help you in all of your relationships. So your precious people, your friends and family, but also, Jason, like, how do you manage a very difficult human?
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing to do. Another example would be, how do you manage someone who's in a very difficult situation? Like when I was a chaplain, somebody dying or having just learned to have cancer or somebody who's homeless. There's another relationship that is infected by dynamics, and that's our relationship with God. So the expectation gap is actually all about our faith relationship and the gap between what we believe about God versus what we experience from God. I believe God loves me, but I struggle to experience. I believe God's with me, but I struggle to see it. And so that book takes these same relational dynamics and looks at our faith to show us how we get stuck in predictable patterns in our faith, just the way we do in our human relationships. And how can we fundamentally enjoy the God we believe in? So that's the heart of that book.
I think the big thing, like you did in managing leadership anxiety, Steve, is I always love how you start things off, just like you started with the anxiety gap. You talk about the false reality
Yeah.
and the expectation gap. And I think you just gave an example like, okay, I know God loves me, but I'm struggling with the experiential nature of that. So when we think about the false reality in that first chapter, what helps set the tone there?
Yeah. That's exactly it. So reactivity, contagious anxiety, it's the only anxiety that's always based on something false, but your body acts like it's real. So, for example, Jason, I grew up in Western Australia. When I go home to visit my family, my parents used to live in a remote part of Australia. And I remember walking into the guest room once, this is 3 years ago, and there was a reptile tail wrapped around the vacuum hose in the guest room.
Ooh,
There was
oh,
some kind of
geez.
reptile had moved in, and Aussie reptiles, not to be messed with.
Correct.
It, I can only see the tail. So it's either a big lizard or it's a tiger snake. And one
Mm,
of them is deadly and one's completely harmless. That's what's called acute anxiety. Anytime your body might be in danger or a loved one's body might be in danger, That's what's clinically called acute anxiety. So my heart was racing. I get a big dose of adrenaline, like I'm on high alert to flush out this reptile. Turned out just to be a big lizard. It was like a 2.5 foot long lizard.
Oh,
It's
wow.
fine. But you've had that same experience if you've ever had to avoid a car accident or if you've ever lost a child in a playground, that's acute anxiety. But reactivity, it gives you the same bodily response if you're a people pleaser. So people pleasing is not a real threat like a tiger snake is, but my body is telling me it is a real threat. If you're a perfectionist, making a mistake is not a real threat like a tiger snake, but your body is telling you it is a real threat.
Wow.
And so the heart of reactivity is a false belief or a false reality. No wonder we struggle to relate to God because we're not in reality anymore. We're in our own fiction. We're in an assumption. And this has all kinds of implications. This is why we get in fights with our spouse because we forget that she's our lover. She's now functionally like our enemy in the moment where I have to be right or I have to get the last word. Like we just lose all sense of reality when we're reactive. The same is true with our faith. We lose sight of God when we're reactive. So learning to notice when we're in false reality, it's a deeper work, but it's fundamental to healthy relationships.
Wow. Steve, thank you for that, that breakdown of the false reality. It shapes so much of how just everything, our perception, the responses and the triggers. So I appreciate that breakdown. Steve, again, just like managing leadership anxiety, where can people go get a copy of the expectation?
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's published anywhere you buy your books. You can I've got the benefit of a weird last name, so you can search my name and find my books and stuff as well.
Absolutely. Before we go, Steve, you have a podcast, a show of your own, and you've given us some sneak peeks today, but tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's called Being Human. It's on the Christianity Today platform or channel, and it gets into all of these dynamics. So we help you notice the dynamics that infect your relationships. And we talk about those types of relationships, your relationship with yourself, with your people, with difficult people, with God. So it's all about being human sized. And that's code word because when we're reactive, we no longer are human sized. We tend to get bigger than human to cope, or we tend to go smaller than human to survive. So it's helping people relax into God's presence by being human sized. So that's, yeah, Being Human is the name of the show.
Love it, folks. Make sure if you like Steve and if you like what you've heard, go get a copy of Managing Leadership Anxiety. Go get your copy of The Expectation Gap and make sure you support Steve and his show. It'll be some life changing wisdom that he shares. Steve, when you think about we're nearing the mid year, which is outrageous,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
but at the time of the recording of this podcast, but Steve, as we hit the tipping point of the year, what are you excited about? Maybe the back half of 2025.
What a great question. I, everywhere I go, I feel like I see God is doing something new. I'm in my 50s now. I've been a follower of Christ for almost coming up 37, 38 years. I feel like there is a revival. Most of my work is with churches, and almost every church I'm working with, there are more baptisms than ever, more people coming to faith. I think that's what I'm most excited about. And then on a personal level, we as an organization are starting to build more experiences for people. So we host intensives here in Colorado, but October, we're doing our first Camino walk in Spain for
Hmm.
people who want to do this work on a Camino journey. And I'm pretty pumped about that.
Very cool. Steve, I don't have all the details and I can tell you I'm excited just on the highlight that you've given. So thank you for sharing that. Steve, is I would love to stay with you another 3 hours, but folks, we can't do that. Steve's got to go and he's got to finish impacting lives. But Steve, you've given information about your books, website, social media. What's the best way for listeners to connect with you and your content?
Yeah, they can go to stevecusswords.com. I've got a free couple of video courses on there they can take. They can join, I send a newsletter of tips every week, and they can join that or chase any of my resources, or if they want me to come out and help them with their organization, they can submit an inquiry through there.
Love it. And folks, don't you worry. Steve's given a lot of nuggets of wisdom and resources. We'll have his books, the podcast, and his website all in the show notes. So don't you worry. You will be able to interact with him and his content for sure. Steve, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Thanks for stopping by here on the Fortified Life podcast. Cannot thank you enough.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. Folks, you know how we leave things here on the show. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. And remember, from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.